Great.
All right, all right, cool. This is NFTCulture. I'm Pio, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Marco De Falco from the YouTube channel BlockGems. How's it going, Marco?
All good. How's it going with you, Pio?
It's going well. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. I think this is like the third time that we've done this. And today I wanted to focus on virtual land. So specifically land in the Sandbox and Decentraland. I know that you follow this very closely. You know a lot more about it than I do. So I want to pick your brain and get an understanding of, what's going on in that space and where you can kind of see it heading. Heading. So, I wanted to see, could you kind of give a simple explanation, kind of a high level explanation to people on what, land in the Sandbox or land in Decentraland actually means?
Absolutely. So I think one good place to start is to start from the emergence of the NFTs and the fact that ever since the NFTs started as tokens in general, there was also this idea of creating virtual worlds, creating these metaverses. So places that are effectively decentralized applications, decentralized games that you can own a piece of, and that piece of the game, that piece of that world, a fantastic world, of course, a world of fantasy is really yours, and that you can transfer, that you can rent out to other users for whichever purpose they want, and create a separate economy with their currency, with their actors, their businesses, that is independent, of course, of the real world, but is also non-centralized. It's really in the hands of the users. And I think this narrative took off pretty well because many projects started with a similar scope, a similar intention, so to speak. And now there are at least like easy half a dozen of them that are live right now, at the very least, and that are rather successful. You mentioned the Sandbox, the Decentraland for sure, but there's also Crypto Voxels, there is also Axie Infinity, which is huge, has many aspects to it, but also has the aspect of the metaverse and the land connected to it. There is Somnium VR, there is Miranda's, there's so many. Everyone has some differences, they're not doing exactly the same thing. Of course, some are betting on certain aspects and some are betting on other aspects, but probably the one narrative that is connecting all of them is what I dubbed, but not just me, but it is rather known in this space, that the narrative is the Wild West narrative, basically having one place of free land that is not being conquered yet, that is not being taken yet, where you can claim a piece of it, own it, and start something new and expanding the pie, so to speak, in a new economy. And you mentioned the Sandbox and the Decentraland, and indeed these are some of the projects that I consider the most interesting in the space, at least right now, at the current state of things, when it comes to the ownership of land and the sort of real estate aspect of it. And you tell me, do we want to go after the Sandbox? What do you have in mind? Does that sound good? Or
yes,
do you want to talk about any project specifically?
Well, yeah, we'll talk about the Sandbox, we'll talk about Decentraland, and then sure, we can touch on like Somnium and, some of these other projects that you talked about. One question that I have is, how important is like virtual reality, like, virtual reality goggles and things like that to the success of this space? I guess what I'm asking is the idea here that as virtual reality technology, A, continues to develop, and then B, becomes more mainstream and more of like a household good where every house has like an Oculus or some sort of VR headset, is that essential to this land continuing to have value? Or is the idea that the land stands on its own and right now there's like, a real demand for it? Like, help me sort of understand that, because I'm coming from a place of not really knowing that much about it.
So the VR aspect, I think it's a really nice to have, but it's not essential. And certainly it's not essential right now, and it's not essential, in my personal opinion, to a successful development of this space. And the reason for this is because virtual worlds have been existing for, I don't want to say a decade, but several years now. Any MMORPG is a world that you log in to and you start playing, and you don't have necessarily VR goggles on. You can still enjoy, you can still feel part of the world, have your own avatar, have your own character, and develop your character and your story within that environment without needing to rely on virtual reality to do that. However, some of the projects in the space started off with at least the ambition to rely heavily on this technology. Decentraland was one of them. And I believe that right now, that idea is not as strong as it was used to, although I think the ambition is still there. Somnium VR certainly is. And as I mentioned, is a nice feature to have going further in the future. And certainly the more immersive it gets and the more users you get on the platform that use immersive technology, the more powerful it will be, the experience, and being part of those environments, being part of those virtual worlds. But it's not necessary in order for them to be successful entrepreneurial endeavors. Yeah. That's what I think it is as of now.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And is there a clear number one out of the different entities that you mentioned, like Sandbox, Decentraland, Somnium? Like, is there a clear winner or like a front runner in terms of demand or value or just their position in the space right now?
Certainly, it depends on how you measure it. Because if we want to measure in terms of volume of transactions, Axie Infinity, if we consider all the transactions of that economy, land, but also the Axies themselves, the last month, we are above $170 million in 1 month in terms of traded volume. It is mind-blowing. And this is stuff that is not even, land, for instance, is not even on OpenSea. This is an independent market because they use a side chain called Ronin, although the Axies are still traded there as well. But just to show how powerful that network in terms of users, in terms of volume, it is becoming really, really powerful, really, really strong and gigantic. Also in terms of economy, there are people that use Axie Infinity as a job. There are people in the Philippines or in Southeast Asia in general that play to earn, and it's a sort of side job. And not an expert in the playing the gaming aspect in Axie Infinity, but this is just to give you a metric or at the very least a general understanding of how fast this ecosystem is growing. But if we use other ways of measuring, for instance, how resilient it has been and how long it's been standing, probably Decentraland is the one that has the lead. It was one of the first one that came out. It went through many different evolutions and many different transformations, and it has been aging or actually growing very, very well. And we could say that in terms of the Lindy effect is the one that is the most Lindy. Yeah, so this would be my answer to you. So probably the first spot is now in terms of volume and transactions in the hands of Axie Infinity, but it depends on how you measure it. I think Decentraland has a value and a permanence in the market that is also something that you cannot neglect.
So I think Decentraland was part of the ICO boom of 2017, where initial coin offerings, right? Where many of these went to zero, but obviously Decentraland is not one of them. And I think if you had put in like, $10,000 or something like that into Decentraland in 2017, you'd basically be a millionaire at this point, or you would have had multiple opportunities to sell to become a millionaire by now, given the kind of ups and downs that we've seen on this bull run. So when you think about Decentraland, what's going on with it now? Like, where is it sort of at? And then where could you kind of see it going? Like, have there been any major announcements recently about any partnerships or any projects that are kind of playing in there? And how could you kind of see Decentraland developing?
So I think that, first of all, one of the most peculiar aspects is that uh, it has been pretty resilient to the booms and busts that we have seen throughout these years. Even recently, the amount of volatility that we have seen in the NFT space in general, the lots of land in Decentraland are still selling very, very strong. Now, for instance, the floor price on OpenSea stands at $3,400, more or less, 2,400, 2,500, if you want to buy now a plot of land. And at the peak, the valuation was probably the double, but we know how fluctuating NFTs can be. So getting a 90% correction is considered normal. Having a 70% correction is considered normal in the space. And the general trend throughout the years has been with a lot of fluctuation, but it's been going up. And one of the partnerships that in recent times has been very, very strong, and this happened in last April, probably it's the most significant event in my opinion, is the partnership with Polygon Matic, the sidechain, the layer 2 actually for Ethereum. You might be familiar with that. And this allows a level of liquidity on the platform that is absolutely insane, because now transactions that might happen between users can be very, very liquid, very smooth. Because if you had to transact for anything in Ethereum, the gas price would have been an obstacle to that, and some transaction would have been absolutely anti-economical. But having a currency that you can use there and the power, that could propel a casino, for instance, or any other service provider of anything you want, is something that really makes a difference as of now, and can really boost the network effects and in general the permanency of the ecosystem, I would say. So these are some of the elements that I would keep at the top of my mind when considering where to invest, what to invest in.
Sure. And so let's say someone was to buy land in Decentraland right now, right? They would buy it on OpenSea. Is that correct?
So yes, sure. So you can view transactions, and you can also do your own research on the Decentraland website, on the Decentraland application itself. But of course, the market on OpenSea is there for everyone to buy in the secondary market. All the land has been allocated, so it is not like, for instance, in Sandbox, where you keep on having an issuance of land. The map is not completely discovered yet in that kind of space. In the center, and the case is that everything is available now, and everything is in the hand of somebody. And the characteristics of the map are so there are different aspects that dictate the value of land, and some are one of the characteristics, one of the things to keep in mind that are valid throughout different virtual worlds is that location is an important factor, whichever virtual world you pick. And by location, in most cases, it means how close it is to the center of the map. And also in the center, and this is the case. I've made quite a few videos about it and about valuations and what to consider. So there is also valid material up there on YouTube, but not necessarily on my channel as well. How close you are to a road, if the road is a large road, that what's so called as a double road or not, and other aspects as well. it is important also to state that some of the transactions that occur do not occur at the floor level that you see on the on OpenSea, which means that there is a possibility to catch very good deals, very good occasions that are traded below floor price. So floor price is an indication for the market and where we stand, but sometimes other people really need the money, or people forgot to tweak a price and left a price that is now not in tune with what the market price should be. And we know that this happens a lot. And there are also other situations, other corner cases, and there are ways to hunt for good deals if we have the time and will to put in the hours to analyze.
And so if someone's buying land on Decentraland, besides the typical NFT flip play where, like, for example, we saw it literally last night with the goats NFTs, there's just this tremendous amount of secondary volume. The floor is rising, like the whole floor is being gobbled up. So if you bought one at the floor at 7 p.m. and you held it until 11 p.m., you're able to make money, right? Because the floor, if you sell it, right, the floor went up. So besides that, because obviously there's the whole buy it, hold it, sell it mentality. If someone buys land in Decentraland, why? Like, why are they doing that? Are they doing that because they assume that land is going to have crazy value in the future, or they have the option to build on it? Like, what would the mentality be for just an everyday person that is an NFT collector to actually buy that plot of land on Decentraland?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I want to say is that you will never have, not never, I mean, I don't know the future, but in the last few days, so to speak, but also in the last month, the last 2 months, you don't see, if you look at the data, the same level of liquidity, so the same amount of transactions, same amount of volume that you see in the peak days of some of these projects, of these avatar NFTs. In one single day, there could be even just half a dozen transactions. So this just to give you an idea of the level of hype that is completely different. So there could be these huge peaks in these avatar NFTs projects, but the Decentraland is not coming out right now, right? It is, as we mentioned before, an older project with users that just want to keep their land. They're not after just a quick buck. And sometimes, and what I'm seeing right now is that the flipping behavior is not that prevalent in that space, and it's much more of a buy and hold investment or an entrepreneurial investment to begin with, where you are actually buying because you want to build something on it, because you want to do something with it. Also because a plot of land in the Decentraland does give you this optionality and this possibility, whereas an avatar does not, at least not with the projects that I am aware of as of today. Sure, there might be something cooking somewhere that has this potential, because the space is growing super fast, and so some ideas out there might be in this direction. But I think that the narrative there is not to make a quick buck just by flipping in one day. Yes, at the peak of a bull market, this is something that can happen, but this is relatively a quiet time, or a quieter time for that kind of ecosystem. This is what I'm saying.
Okay, and how does someone build on Decentraland? Does that involve computer programming? Does that involve buying additional digital goods? Like, how does somebody actually build?
So you can buy a lot of stuff. You can buy these paraphernalia, as are called, to make your and these are NFTs effectively, and some of them are also connected with other projects. I don't know if you've seen, there is the hoodie from the BAYC. And also other pieces that come from other projects, but there are I would call them organizations existing in real world. For instance, Binance that have their own base, and it's this building that they have modeled and put there, and everyone can do the same. In a project such as the Sandbox, for instance, you would have a relatively easy interface to do that. There is a program specific for that. There is a point-and-click program like Box Edit. That's the name of the program that allows you to use voxels. I don't know if you're familiar with how the graphics of the Sandbox look like. It's all these voxelated, or not to say pixelated style. It's similar to Minecraft for you to build your things, right? And similar stories also for Box Edit. So everyone has their own interface and their way for building things. Every universe has their recipe to do this kind of things.
Thank you for that response. And I appreciate you kind of explaining this stuff simply for me, because, you know, I'm much less informed than you are when it comes to this stuff. So what is like the fundamental difference between, say, Decentraland and another very big name in the space, the Sandbox? What would be the kind of core differences between these two options?
Okay, so there are many similarities. One of the main difference as of today, so let's start from the maturity. The Sandbox is a relatively young project compared to Decentraland in this space. And if I'm not mistaken, we're talking about a project that started in 2020 or late 2019 for the Sandbox. And I don't recall the exact date, I may be mistaken here, but anyways, you don't go as far as 2017. The Sandbox is a game. While the Decentraland is not necessarily a game, it's something more akin to Second Life, The Sims, and a place where people could just go there to meet, to talk, to build a network, to build something, build an economy, do whatever they want. It's a place in a metaverse. The Sandbox is a game that has a set of rules, a way and certain points to grow a character, on specific skills, on objects that do certain things, and can empower your character more, specific ways of transportations. And it's a series of mini games on a virtual world. So you can imagine this as some sort of, I buy a plot of land where I build a mini golf court, or I build a kart racetrack, and then people show up to my racetrack, pay a fee in sand, which is the local currency, so to speak, would be the equivalent of mana in Decentraland.
It's the token that's associated with the
exactly. Yep. And you would be able to play that game, and you're paying that amount of money to the owner of that, not necessarily plot of land, but game. And you could go as far as saying, I own the land, but I can license that land, I can rent that land to somebody that has a better idea than I have on something to develop on that land. And that might be a game, as mentioned, an experience for other users. And if you build a nice experience, you can make good money. That's the value proposition of being an entrepreneur on the Sandbox. But you could also use, as mentioned, Box Edit to build stuff. Then you build stuff and you sell it as an in-game NFT. That could be a villa on somebody's land. And then you could be an architect in the Sandbox, for instance, that has a job, makes villas for other people.
So that's the art part coming in, right? So if someone's making beautiful villas, digital pixelated villas for the Sandbox, and it's like, then I'm sure right now there's someone that is the #1 architect of the Sandbox, where everybody wants the villas that person makes, right? Like, so I could see that. That's very interesting. You know, can you tell me about some of these partnerships between, like, for example, I think Bored Ape Yacht Club just announced some sort of land purchase. I know
Yes.
that the unsuccessful Super Yeti NFT project
Mhm.
had talked about acquiring land. Can you talk about like, what that means exactly to those projects and how, they kind of benefit from doing that, and what the future might hold given, those kind of partnerships?
Absolutely. We can start from the Bored Apes example. For
Hmm.
instance, in that case, what happened? They bought a piece of land and they said, this is what we're going to do on it. We're going to have a yacht in a body of water where you can show up. And for instance, if you have this hat, if your ape has this hat or this specific trait, which were related to marine or sailor attributes, you can enter for free and you can party here without paying the ticket for the experience. And so this is what the partners do. For instance, the partnership with Atari, I do not know the specifics and I do not know the details, but what you can expect or what you would imagine is that they're building a game there in that space, or an experience that might be valuable for the gamers, for the users. And there are all sorts of partners there now, even Binance, or MetaKey, or all sorts of partners, and not in all cases it is disclosed what is that they're going to offer. And this is because the game is in development and the experiences are in development. So as much as, if I'm not mistaken, a beta is out and you can start enjoying something, you can start doing something, but the game has not been fully released, so that you can just go ahead and enjoy the full experience as you can right now in Decentraland, for instance. And if I can segue in one of that I consider the most interesting aspects in the sandbox is you have land that is still being released, and now they are selling or releasing one wave after another during this summer, every week, of new plots of land. And this is started 3 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. But even before that, there were other public land sales and other waves. Now, the majority of the map has been covered, but there are these other pieces that are being sold, that are being released piece by piece.
Very interesting. And you were telling me off air that the price floor is holding steady despite the issuance of new land. So it's almost like Bitcoin, right? Like new coins are coming onto the market. So new land is coming onto the market, but that price is staying stable. So there's enough demand to actually hold that floor price despite the increase of supply, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. This is something that fascinates me because it's it's like you have a gold mine, and you then at some point discover that there is another gold mine, and so you know that there is double the supply of what you consider a scarce good, and then you would expect the value of what has been already extracted to go down, and this somehow didn't happen because the amount of purchasers, the amount of buyers is high, is already strong. The network is expanding. They are acquiring probably new buyers, new users. And what I saw is that, so here's how public sale works. You show up on time and you wait for the chronometer to go to zero. So when it started, you can start buying, and you need to pick a plot of land and pay in sand. And the price is always the same for a regular lot of land. It should be around 1,000 sand. That today's conversion rate is about $500. But the fluctuation in cryptocurrencies, in altcoins, is very high. So if you're probably watching this video 1 week from now, this could be completely off, right? But this is where the price stands today. The problem is that in the last two public sales, I tried to buy, but it was impossible. And it was impossible because the whole map would be booked in a matter of seconds. So it was like on Nifty Gateway. You remember when we were discussing in previous conversations, sometimes you cannot possibly get your hands over on a limited edition. It just doesn't happen. And so they had to use measures in order to give to anybody, to everyone, a fair chance. And this is something similar is going on right there. You hardly have a chance to put your hands on a plot of land now in a public sale. And something that I found interesting is that there is an arbitrage basically going on, because as the price of land in the secondary market stays at a fixed amount, more or less, and we're talking about 0.3, more or less 0.3 Ether, if you want to buy now the cheapest plot of land, this is around $600. So you have this $100 spread that if you are a flipper, you can flip immediately. You could buy from the primary market, sell in the secondary market for a risk-free $100. And this for me was absolutely insane.
I mean, that's an insane arbitrage, and you don't see that often. I think you see it every once in a while, like with the really, really hot collectibles projects, like where it isn't even done being minted yet, but people are already buying it for a profit or buying it above mint price on OpenSea on the secondary market. Like I saw this with Super Yetis. So then you're like, oh, well, I got to go mint, 20 of them and just sell them for a profit, and you see that every once in a while. So that's wild to think about that's happening. So, let's talk a little bit about not Sandbox, not Decentraland, but some of these other projects that are also, very like Axie Infinity. Definitely, I want to talk about that. Some of these other projects that are either moving into the top 3 or 4 or kind of bubbling under.
Yeah, sure. So there are other projects that are interesting in my opinion. So one. So I'll name a few. Okay, there is Crypto Voxels, there is Axie Infinity, as we mentioned, there is Mirandos, and there is Somnium VR. One of those that I consider my least favorite is Somnium VR, and of course, sentiment and updates can occur in a matter of days. So they can come up with something absolutely crazy, super cool that could change my mind immediately. But in the case of Somnium VR, you have these, they're heavily centered on the idea of virtual reality. That is something that it's not, I don't think it will find a lot of resonance with users, also because this is not something that is mainstream right now. It's not something that everyone can afford. And also there's some weird claims on the website. If you go and check this, live forever. There is a claim that says they will use AI to mimic your behavior, or the behavior of your user in that space, so that your avatar can keep on living after even you pass away. Something very, very outlandish that didn't resonate very well with me, or that value proposition wasn't really something that I felt in tune with. One that I'm seeing I'm going very quickly because the projects are many, so I cannot dive deep in all of them, right? One of the projects that is very immature, is relatively new, but I found very interesting is Mirandos, because it is an attempt to make an MMORPG on a decentralized application. The scale of the world would be massive. The graphics that they're working on and the style of the game looks very beautiful, very enticing, very attractive, and it has this fantasy flair that I think it is appealing to many people. The fantasy, like this medieval fantasy kind of structure, and there the the revenue model and the value proposition is completely different. You can buy the actual, you have a deed, it's called, for a piece of land, which is basically will be the equivalent of a plot of land, but a deed can have different sizes. So there's not one single unit that would represent the atom of that virtual world. You have just different sizes of things. Some of them have castles inside, some of them have towers inside. So you really buy something that is unique. And inside those, you can have shops. And also these shops are something that you can buy and sell. This is something different from something that I've seen in other virtual worlds propositions, in other metaverses proposition, where these entrepreneurial activities are developed by the users. Here are provided by the authority, the game designers. Those are the predefined things that you can do. And then you can buy the license, so to speak, to have a milking stand, to have a sword manufacturer, or to have any kind of activity that they have predefined for you. This is super immature, meaning it's super early stage. It's not something that I would put my big money in. Although they have been making pretty big sales in the six figures for some of the largest deeds,
Wow.
which is outstanding for something that it's so immaterial yet, because they don't have a game yet, they don't have a playable game yet. So I think that in general, for the virtual worlds and the in general this narrative on owning a piece of virtual land, this narrative is very powerful and is resonating very, very well with many people in the space. And prices have been increasing pretty rapidly across the board. So this is something that, if you are in NFTs, I would just look at or start researching just to see if it's something that might resonate with you, if it's something that you're interested in, and if the logic is something you like.
Sounds like a hot market, man. And just the amount of money that's going into the NFT space, it has to be a good percentage like new money. It has to be. And this is something we've been talking about on this channel for like a week and a half now, is just like, where is all this money coming from? Because we're just seeing these really big buys, including on failed projects, right? So I won't name projects by name, but you'll see a project come out and it'll flop within like 48 to 72 hours. But that doesn't mean that there weren't on the first day like 13 ETH sales, 16 ETH sales, over 20 ETH sales. And it's just amazing to me. Like, that's a lot of money to just basically donate to a failed project, and you can't recoup it. So yeah, that's pretty wild. So one last question on virtual land. Mm-hmm. Where could you see it going? And this is a challenging question, so it's okay if you want to, like, not try to put your reputation on the line with the answer, but I would just like to know, like, if you had to predict like where this is going to be in 3 to 5 years, like, what does virtual land in all of these different platforms that you talked about, what does that look like in 3 to 5 years? Like, how could you see this playing out?
So certainly, being myself invested in the space and these kind of tokens, I think that I have a fairly obvious bullish bias, and that's something that I need to state, because so that the viewer knows, okay, this guy is leaning toward a particular stance to begin with, right? But I think that if we acknowledge that the time that we're going to spend in touch with digital means of communication is going to be increasing more and more in the future. That the number of gamers is just increasing year after year, and that we like to spend time communicating with each other using digital means of communications. And also, if you think about all the bets that even some of the billionaires are doing, one of them being Mark Zuckerberg betting so much on VR and interactions in a VR space, then you see that having an economy, a series of transactions that take place in a virtual world doesn't sound so ridiculous. It doesn't sound so ridiculous to me that one day I would be able to sell a sword or a piece of land that is useful for a game the same way I sell it now within a game in a centralized fashion. I could sell it on Craigslist, on eBay, or on any platform whatsoever, because it is mine. It exists independently of what a central authority might say or might want me to do with it. And then me also, I see the scenario of me using it in a decentralized world where I can be whomever I want, where I can decide the avatar I want to use that day, where I can go play a game, and this game might be an actual entrepreneurial activity of somebody. Why not? I mean, why couldn't we just be game designers in a virtual world where I have an idea for a game and somebody comes and plays with it? I remember I was reading a book. It's called The Future of Almost Everything. And he was talking about how in the late 90s, it was considered inconceivable that people would create and watch their own content. Think about what we do on YouTube. In the 90s, people would say, you're crazy if you think that people would spend time, hours of their days, watching at other, basically, regular
normal
Joes,
person. Yeah.
regular person doing regular things during their days, when production houses that invest millions and millions of dollars on making movies struggle to get audience. That would be ridiculous, right? And you could have exactly the same argument today. You could say there's so many game producers that make games that take millions of dollars in the making, and they fail at building something valuable for them. And you could say, why would I go on this platform, whether it be Decentraland, the Sandbox, Mirandus, and take part in this to play something that a user created, when there are the big guys with big money that are also failing at doing this? Well, I think that still there is a chance for this to happen, and it's much bigger than we think, because we have a previous example. We have a previous example of people building their own content and being successful at it. So this is my answer to you. I'd say this is why I have a bullish stance on this one on 3 to 5 years.
It's a brave new world. And you know, I know you said that this kind of stays on its own, but I really do, like, just as an outsider, as someone that isn't nearly is just not in touch with it really at all, right? Like I'm coming from a place of just not really being involved in the virtual land thing at all. I do think that the VR part will become an integral part. And this is just an uninformed outsider, but like the way I think about it is like, it just seems so much better with that VR headset on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had my first VR experience in the past like 6 months, maybe like 12 months. And it was a first generation PlayStation VR. So not even, you know, updated, right? Like there's Oculus now, and there's all these other, you know, different VR tools that are just so impressive and so updated. And so like even that first generation VR goggle set that I put on really blew me away at how quickly your brain, you know, like forgets about the fact that it's fake. Like I was getting anxiety being in a VR world where stick figures were shooting, you know, virtual bullets at me. And I was like, really like, oh my God, this is intense, you know, because when it cuts off your peripheral vision and you can't see anything except like you look to your right, you look to your left, and everything is digital, right? Your brain gets your nervous system gets fooled. And I've heard scientists talk about it, how easily your nervous system gets fooled by the visual part. And when you cut off the peripherals right that, and you give no anchor for your brain to kind of hold on to, it's just really intense. So I can just imagine going to your, plot of land in the Sandbox and just being like, hey, what's up, Marco? And we're both just in our houses with our VR stuff on, and you're just like showing me around. It's like, look at these NFTs. I got my Beeple right here. I got this, that, and the other thing, like that sounds pretty cool to me, versus me just standing here and having it on my computer screen. That would be like a different story. But yeah, it's an amazing new world. And thank you so much for, explaining it simply and then also going into depth for us. So, you're welcome anytime. And everybody, make sure that you follow Marco on YouTube, subscribe to his platform, BlockGems, his YouTube channel. He doesn't promote his Twitter. I don't know why, but you can follow him there too. But yeah, Marco, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you very much for having me.